A very warm welcome to all of you. Today, we are starting with a very special series for IPMAT beginners. And when it comes to the English language, I'm sure that you guys know the importance of reading comprehension. But reading comprehension comes with its own set of challenges, and especially the question types could pose a real problem for you guys. So, what we are going to do in this very exclusive session is we are going to deal with two different types of question stems. The first one is the main idea question, and the second one is the title based question, right? So, when I talk about the main idea, first of all, let's try to understand what today's session is going to be all about, right? We'll first have an outline of the session. So basically, you're going to see a passage which will be taken from the Hindu editorial. Now, this entire series is based on the Hindu editorials, as you know how imperative it is to read the Hindu editorials, right? So the passages have been cherry picked for you guys specifically from the Hindu editorial. Now we are going to see a passage and I'm going to give you the explanation of the passage. And then we are going to deal with these two questions, main idea as well as title. Now, main idea can be asked in different ways. They can ask you the central idea, the theme of the passage, the main purpose of the passage, the overarching principle of the passage. But every single thing boils down to one thing, and that is they are wanting, to ask basically what exactly is the main concern? Why has the writer written this passage? So you are supposed to identify the main idea. When it comes to title, title should give you an outline of the entire passage. See, after you have already read the passage, you already know the important aspects of the passage, right? Now, the thing is, when it comes to the title based questions, a title should be catchy. A title should not be too narrow or too generic. It should be the right combination, a balance between narrow and broad. Okay. And secondly, it should also give you an outline of the entire passage, right? Now, when it comes to main idea questions, many people are of the opinion that just by reading the first paragraph and the last paragraph, they are good to go to identify the main idea. Uh, this definitely works like 50 to 60% of the times, but not every single time. So I would recommend all of you to read the passage thoroughly first and then, analyze the options and see what works better for you, right? Other than that, there are few traps that you might fall into. So first of all, be extremely careful of the extreme words. Now, if you do not know what extreme words are, words such as always, never, only, all, these are some extreme words. Now what happens is, in the option, if there is an extreme word, then you need to find out the passage, in the passage, whether the writer has talked about the same context in such extreme terms. If yes, then that is your answer. And if the writer is talking about the same issue but in a casual, lukewarm way, then that definitely can never be your answer. Okay, other than that, the other kind of trap is partially true and partially false options. Usually, what happens, because children are in a state of jiffy when they are attempting these questions, so they do not really read the entire option thoroughly. And just by seeing the first half and just by thinking that, oh, this is correct information with respect to the passage, they kind of mark it. Never make that mistake. Always read your options from A to Z. Then the other kind of problems would be when you come across a vocabulary word that you do not know the meaning of. See, vocabulary is something that you build over the course of time, right? So this is something that has to be worked upon consistently, not something that you can magically become extremely good at overnight. Okay, so vocabulary is something that we can work on every single day by revising, for example, 5 or 10 vocabulary words throughout the day. Uh, Other than that, there could be another question trap which could be they can talk about a very narrow option. Narrow option, as in the passage speaks of the political, cultural, social, economical aspect of a country, but the option only speaks of the political and cultural aspect. Now, this is a narrow option. Okay, so be careful about these type of options, and have these things listed in your head already when you're attempting such type of questions. Now let's get started with the first passage. So I'm not really going to give you a lot of time to read the passage. Basically, I just want you to click a picture of this Hindu editorial and read it at your own pace. So this class would be just an explanation of the passage so that you simplify it, and then once you start to read at your own pace, you at least have a clear idea as to what to anticipate in the passage, right? So let's get started with the first passage. Now, the title of the passage is Selective Indecision on the GST Council's 55th meeting decisions. Now, what is this passage all about? So, I want you to click a picture of this and read it at your own pace later. I hope you are done clicking the picture. This is the second part of it. Yes, let's get started. So here we are primarily talking about how about 8 years ago, India started a tax system which is known as the GST, Goods and Services Tax. I think we are all aware of GST and what GST is capable of, right? Now the thing is, the idea was to make taxes simpler and fairer. जब जीएसटी लाया गया था तो हमारा आइडिया बहुत सिंपल था, हमें इस प्रोसेस को बहुत ही सीमलेस, सिंपल, फेयर बनाना था, ठीक है. बट इवन आफ्टर ऑल दीज इयर्स द पीपल इन चार्ज, ये जो जीएसटी के लिए रिस्पॉन्सिबल लोग हैं, विच इज नोन एज द जीएसटी काउंसिल, एंड दैट ऑल्सो इंक्लूड्स द सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट बाय द वे एंड ऑल द स्टेट गवर्नमेंट्स, they are still making confusing changes. And if they are making confusing changes, that means they are just bringing forth more complications for the consumers, right? And it is taking a lot of time for them to fix these problems. 8 साल के बाद भी अगर हम अभी तक इस प्रोसेस को स्ट्रेटन आउट नहीं कर पाए हैं तो कहीं ना कहीं प्रॉब्लम तो चल रही है. So we get to see that recently in the 55th gathering they made some decisions. अब ये decisions क्या थे? तो सबसे पहले तो उन लोगों ने कुछ चीजें clarify की, and it kind of was made clear to all the people there. So सबसे पहले तो farmers selling pepper as well as raisins, इस पे कोई भी GST नहीं लगने वाला है. That is what has been made clear first. Secondly, gift vouchers is also not taxable. Then penalties, which are usually charged by the banks or finance companies, if you do not pay loans on time, उस पे भी आप कोई टैक्स नहीं लगा सकते हो. Now, it is very surprising that it took them 8 years to say these obvious things, right? That's what we get to know after reading the first part. फिर हमें एक और चीज पता चलती है कि दे चेंज द जीएसटी रेट्स ऑन पॉपकॉर्न. अभी रिसेंटली तुम लोगों ने देखा होगा समथिंग एज बनाल एज पॉपकॉर्न. बनाल मीन्स ऑर्डिनरी. एंड ऑब्वियसली यहाँ पे जब पॉपकॉर्न पे जीएसटी उन लोगों ने लगाया तो उसके उनके जो पर्पस था वो काफी अलग था. नाउ देयर विल बी थ्री टैक्सेस फॉर पॉपकॉर्न. दैट्स व्हाट वी गॉट टू नो. द फर्स्ट वन इज स्वीटेंड पॉपकॉर्न इज टैक्स मोर. उसका रीजन ये है कि गवर्नमेंट ने बोला है कि इट इज फॉर हेल्थ रीजंस. ऑब्वियसली स्वीटेंड पॉपकॉर्न इज नॉट रियली हेल्दी, so for health reasons they have increased the taxes for sweetened popcorn. But such small confusing changes, it kind of makes GST look less like a good and simple tax. ठीक है, again people have a lot of queries. People do not really know how it is working for them. ठीक है. एंड गवर्नमेंट ने प्रॉमिस तो आपको बहुत सारी चीजें की थी 2017 में, बट अभी तक कुछ भी सिंप्लीफाई हो नहीं पाया है, एंड इट स्टिल लुक्स लाइक अ कॉम्प्लिकेटेड प्रोसेस. ठीक है. Then we also get to know that they are also delaying some important GST rates. ठीक है. तो आगे चल के हमें पता चलता है, as you can see here, now there's a special group of ministers who are supposed to make GST rates simpler. बट जब भी वो अपना ओपिनियन देते हैं उनकी कोई बात ही नहीं सुन रहा है. सो एक स्पेशल कमिटी बिल्ड की गई थी इसी चीज के लिए, टू प्रोवाइड सम इनिशियल सजेशंस, बट द काउंसिल डिड नॉट इवन डिस्कस देम. तो ये भी एक प्रॉब्लम है कि कोई आपको कुछ चीजें अच्छी बता रहा है तो आप उसकी बातें नहीं सुन रहे हो. Now, another group was supposed to review the GST on life and health insurance policies. Now, because the government kind of promised to look into it soon, but they did not again. ठीक है. They also could not really decide on anything, and they just said that they are simply going to talk about it later. So they have just prolonged the process. उन लोगों ने इस process को और भी ज़्यादा एक तरीके से आप बोल सकते हो extend कर दिया. And this delay is a huge problem. Why? उसका रीजन यही है कि बहुत सारे लोग थे, people who were waiting for these possible GST cuts before actually purchasing health insurance policies. तो ये लोग सिर्फ वेट कर रहे थे इस कमेटी का टू टेक सम डिसीजन, सो दैट अगर कुछ आगे चल के कट होता है जीएसटी में तो दे कैन इजीली परचेज दीज इंश्योरेंस. बट ऐसा कुछ हुआ ही नहीं. देन मूविंग टू द नेक्स्ट पार्ट, एज यू कैन सी, so in November, new life insurance sales also dropped for the first time this year. उसका रीजन यही डिले था. ठीक है, बिकॉज द कस्टमर्स केप्ट ऑन वेटिंग एंड नो सॉलिड डिसीजन हैज बीन टेकन. तो इसकी वजह से क्या हुआ, पहली बार हम लोगों ने देखा कि न्यू लाइफ इंश्योरेंस सेल्स ड्रॉप्ड, एंड दैट टू ड्रामेटिकली. सो एक और चीज आगे चल के हमें यहाँ पे पता चलती है कि दे इवन रिवर्स द सुप्रीम कोर्ट्स डिसीजन अबाउट रियल एस्टेट. नाउ व्हाट डज दैट मीन? इसका मतलब ये है कि द सुप्रीम कोर्ट had actually earlier allowed real estate companies to claim tax credit. तो उन लोगों ने पहले, सुप्रीम कोर्ट ने इसको अलाउ किया था कि जो भी रियल एस्टेट कंपनीज है दे कैन एक्चुअली क्लेम टैक्स क्रेडिट फॉर बिल्डिंग कमर्शियल प्रॉपर्टीज विच दे वांट टू रेंट और लीज इन फ्यूचर. ठीक है. नाउ द जीएसटी काइंड ऑफ विड्रू दैट ऑल्सो, दे हैव टेकन दैट बेनिफिट बैक फ्रॉम रियल एस्टेट, आप बोल सकते हो रियल एस्टेट प्रॉपर्टी ओनर्स, एंड इवन मेड द rule apply retroactively from 2017. तो एक तरीके से आप बोल सकते हो कि जो सुप्रीम कोर्ट कुछ अच्छा करने के लिए सोच रहा था वो भी उन लोगों से आपने छीन लिया. ठीक है. Now this is obviously a worrying factor for the investors because sudden tax changes do not reflect good on a country's reputation. देखो सिंपल सी बात है, अगर इन्वेस्टर्स आपकी कंट्री में इंटरेस्टेड है टू इन्वेस्ट मनी, दे नीड अ स्टेबल रूल बुक, और जो भी गाइडलाइंस है वो बहुत ही ज्यादा क्लियर और सिंपल होने चाहिए. ऐसे अगर आप अनप्रिडिक्टेबिलिटी दिखाते रहोगे, इंस्टेबिलिटी दिखाते रहोगे, तो ऑटोमेटिकली द इन्वेस्टिंग कंट्रीज वुड एक्चुअली विड्रॉ their investment from our country, and that's exactly something that happened in the past also because of similar problems. So that's what we get to see, that in conclusion we can clearly see that GST jo tha originally, it was meant to straighten out the process, to smoothen it out, but it is only just adding to the delay, and it has use some really complicated methods, and that's the reason there is lack of clarity. तो जिस चीज को 8 साल लग गए हमें समझाने में, तो I don't really know how many years more it's going to take to actually become a seamless process, and that's what this passage is all about. Right. Now let's check out the questions. So the first question, as I've already said, it talks about the central argument of the passage. Central argument also means the main idea. What does the entire passage revolve around? तो ये तो हम लोगों ने डिस्कस किया ही कि पूरा पैसेज किस चीज के अराउंड रिवॉल्व करता है. The council's indecision stems from political compromises rather than economic rationale. Should that be your answer? सोचो. इट इज जस्ट अ मिसलीडिंग ऑप्शन. उसका रीजन बहुत सिंपल सा है कि कहीं ना कहीं हम लोगों ने एक तरीके से आप बोल सकते हो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी जो है, जो जीएसटी की प्रोसेस में दिखाई दे रही है, ठीक है, उसके बारे में बात ना करके we have shifted the focus on something else in the first option. So the council's indecision stems from political compromises rather than economic rationale. तो इसमें clearly एक चीज समझ में आती है कि it misattributes the cause, which is political compromise, without actually highlighting how complexity contradicts GST's central promise of simplicity. तो इसने आपकी जो मेन आर्ग्यूमेंट था, which is GST was originally built to simplify the process, but actually it complicated it. वो वाली पार्ट जो है वो लिया ही नहीं है, तो इसलिए ऑप्शन ए कैन नॉट रियली बी योर आंसर. ओ वेट अ सेकंड. Look at the B option. Recent GST decisions undermine the claim that GST is a simple tax. This kind of looks like the correct answer. Undermine means weaken. Recent GST decisions weaken the claim that GST is a simple tax, and that's what we get to know after reading the entire passage. That it was supposedly a simple tax, but it did not really turn out the way we expected it to be. Okay, let's put it on hold. Option C, the council must balance state and central concerns to maintain revenue stability. सबसे पहले तो balancing federal state revenue is mentioned. ये बात mention तो हुई है, but that is not really this editorial's focus. Focus बहुत clear था कि जीएसटी को सिंपल होना था, but जीएसटी actually is full of complexity. ठीक है, तो हम अगर यहाँ पे देखें so balancing federal state revenue is definitely mentioned, but it is not really the primary focus, which is on how decisions complicate rather than stabilize GST. तो हमारा primary focus यही है कि जो decisions हैं वो आज भी complicated है. It is not really simplified at all. चलो, moving to the next one. Simplifying GST rates would have improved compliance and growth. पहली बात तो ये एक suggestion है, ठीक है. This is not really the main idea of the passage. It is more towards the prescriptive part of the argument. यानी कि आपको कोई suggest कर रहा है कि ऐसा करो. And it actually lacks reference to the council's specific actions also. And again, it also does not really talk about how GST undermines its own simplicity. So as we can see, simplifying GST rates would have improved compliance and growth. This is more towards the suggestive part of it. It is more like a suggestion, पहली बात तो. And again, does not really encapsulates the main argument of the passage, which is it was ideally supposed to be a simple tax, but actually it is a very complex tax. ठीक है? And it took them years to actually state the obvious, right? So answer is option B. Then moving to the next one. Which is the most suitable alternative title? Now, Compromise Council, the politics of GST. When we talk about this, we are basically blaming the council, right? When we look at the first option, Compromised Council, the politics of GST, focuses more on politics and not the broken promise of simplicity, which is the whole soul agenda that the writer wanted to convey. That's why option A will be eliminated. Just a second. I am not able to clear this out. This is broken. Okay. Then moving to the next one, GST Council's mixed signals. Now this looks like a very vague option. It is too vague, unclear. क्योंकि यहाँ पे मेन तो बात हो ही नहीं रही है अबाउट सिंप्लीफिकेशन ऑफ जीएसटी. ठीक है, दैट इज समथिंग विच इज हिडन. एंड यहाँ पे सिर्फ एक मिक्स सिग्नल्स की बात हो रही है, तो मिक्स सिग्नल्स तो कुछ भी हो सकते हैं. सो दिस इज ऑब्वियसली अ वेग ऑप्शन. इट hints at inconsistency, that's for sure, but it actually fails to highlight the complexity of GST and ideally how it should have been simple. ठीक है, तो ये वाला पार्ट इसीलिए eliminated है. Taxing complexity, GST's unkept promise. Yes, this is exactly our answer because it fits the context best. पहली बात तो promise क्या था? That हम लोगों ने ये जीएसटी लगाया ही क्यों था? सो दैट वी कुड simplify the process, right? So that we can make it easy for everybody to understand, fairer for the common audience. और वही चीज हमने क्या की, उसी प्रॉमिस को हम नहीं रख पाए, क्योंकि हमने देखा कि it became more and more complex with every passing year. And that's what makes this the correct answer, the choice. When we talk about option D, revenue versus reform, the GST dilemma, अगर हम यहाँ पे सबसे पहले तो बात करें, it talks about a generic tension. ये एक जनरल प्रॉब्लम है, बट पैसेज की प्रॉब्लम नहीं। ठीक है, तो रेवेन्यू वर्सेस रिफॉर्म एक जनरल प्रॉब्लम है, और इस चीज के बारे में ये जो अनसर्टेनिटी है वो कॉमनली हम लोग एक्सपीरियंस करते हैं, बट क्या पैसेज में इसके साथ हमने डील किया? नहीं किया। सो दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई ऑप्शन सी मेक्स द कट, एंड दैट इज द बेस्ट आंसर फॉर अस, राइट? मूविंग टू द नेक्स्ट वन. Again, I would want you guys to click a picture of this article. The name of the article is Damning Silence on India's Pegasus Probe. And this is the second part of it. Also, if you must have noticed, there is a link right below it. So you can even avail this link. You will be directly taken to the part of this website where this article is. Now, let's try to understand what this passage is all about. तो यहाँ पे सबसे पहले तो बताया गया कि how recently a US court decided that an Israeli company जिसका नाम है NSO Group actually broke the law by secretly putting Pegasus spyware. Now, Pegasus spyware is obviously something which is illegal, right? And ये जो Pegasus spyware था, it was put on people's phones through WhatsApp. ठीक है, जो कि ऑब्वियसली आप बोल सकते हो एक हाईली कंट्रोवर्शियल इशू है। उसका रीजन बहुत सिंपल सा है, बिकॉज इफ पीपल एक्चुअली नो about your data, they can misuse it, they can abuse it, right? Now here is what happened basically. So सबसे पहले तो WhatsApp sued NSO Group in 2019. तो ये 2019 में WhatsApp already sued NSO Group and saying that Pegasus kind of hacked somewhere around कितना यहाँ पे लिखा हुआ है, आई थिंक 14,000 या 1400 मोबाइल फोन्स। सो इसीलिए व्हाट्सएप ने एनएसओ को सू किया था। And moving forward, we also got to know that the court that actually, the NSO had, जब कोर्ट में ये सब बातें हुई, the court found out that the NSO had created a special fake version of WhatsApp. और ये जो स्पेशल फेक वर्जन था जिसके बारे में आई थिंक यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है, अगेन एज यू कैन सी, इसका नाम है व्हाट्सएप इंस्टॉलेशन सर्वर, एंड इट वाज टू स्नीक स्पाईवेयर इनटू फोन्स। ठीक है, तो इसका जो सोल पर्पस ही ये था कि स्पाईवेयर जो है वो दूसरों के फोन्स में डाल दिया जाए। ठीक है, नाउ द कोर्ट रूल्ड दैट एनएसओ वायोलेटेड कंप्यूटर फ्रॉड लॉज। तो हमें आगे चल के यही पता चलता है कि एनएसओ जो है उसने सही में कंप्यूटर फ्रॉड लॉज जो है उसको वायोलेट किया था। एंड मूविंग फॉरवर्ड वी ऑल्सो गेट टू नो why it is so important for India. So we get to know that it is important for India because back in 2021, there were allegations that Pegasus was used in India to spy on journalists, activists, then doctors, even court staff. तो ये इंडिया के लिए भी इम्पोर्टेंट है क्योंकि इंडिया को भी आप बोल सकते हो अक्यूज किया गया था in 2021. Now the Supreme Court of India kind of set up an expert committee as we get to see. ठीक है, तो उन लोगों ने एक एक्सपर्ट कमिटी इन 2022 बिठाई, जो कि यहाँ पे दिया हुआ है एज यू कैन सी, राइट? नाउ द थिंग इज दे वर सपोज्ड टू इन्वेस्टिगेट 29 phones. So they checked 29 phones, but the thing is the result was there was no clear proof of Pegasus on these phones, although 5 phones में आपको malware जरूर मिला था। ठीक है, तो क्लियर प्रूफ तो नहीं मिला पेगासस का, बट हाँ, दिस वाज मेड क्लियर दैट देयर वाज malware on 5 of the phones, right? Now the problem was, as we can see, the government did not really cooperate with this investigation. That means the government wasn't on board for this investigation to further, आप बोल सकते हो, take the necessary steps. इस चीज में गवर्नमेंट का जो रिस्पॉन्स था वो भी आप बोल सकते हो बहुत सेटिस्फैक्ट्री नहीं था. तो एक तो रिस्पॉन्स था कि इंडियाज लॉज आर सो स्ट्रिक्ट दैट इलीगल ये जो स्पाइंग है इट कैन नॉट रियली हैपन. तो ये हमारा फर्स्ट ऑफ द रिस्पॉन्सेस था कि इंडिया के लॉज ही इतने स्ट्रिक्ट है कि ऐसा कुछ इलीगल स्पाइंग हो ही नहीं सकता इंडिया में. देन we cannot really say whether we have Pegasus. That's a national security issue. ये हमारा सेकेंड रिस्पॉन्स था कि हम लोग ये बता ही नहीं सकते कि हमारे पास पेगासस है या नहीं है, बिकॉज ये एक नेशनल सिक्योरिटी इशू बन जाएगा. देन issue है, sorry. Then we also got to know, but in parliament they did admit that they knew some users were actually targeted through WhatsApp. So उन लोगों ने जब admit किया है इस चीज को, तो then why couldn't they talk about it in such explicit terms in the beginning? तो इस चीज को क्यों एक्सेप्ट नहीं कर रहे थे पहले? ठीक है, तो हमें यही पता चला कि also there were credible reports that Pegasus may have been used to kind of plant fake evidence. Pegasus को इस तरीके से भी यूज किया गया ऑन पीपल्स कंप्यूटर्स. उसमें एक फेक एविडेंस आपने दूसरों के कंप्यूटर में प्लांट कर दिया सो दैट वी कैन फ्रेम दिस पर्सन as a person who can be, accused for doing something illegal. So as we can very well see that देखा जाए तो technically the government should have, supported this decision and should have been on board with it, but they did not really cooperate. Now that the US court kind of held that NSO group is responsible for all of this, ये जो Pegasus spyware है जो आपने प्लांट किया है दूसरों के फोन्स में, now people are asking some other questions. जैसे कि सबसे पहले तो एक क्वेश्चन ये पूछा गया यहाँ पे कि व्हाट हैपेंड टू द सुप्रीम कोर्ट कमिटीज फुल रिपोर्ट, क्योंकि आज तक दैट रिपोर्ट हैजंट बीन मेड पब्लिक. व्हाट हैपेंड टू दैट रिपोर्ट, सब लोगों ने ये बहुत वैलिड क्वेश्चन पूछा. Second, I think they have also asked, shouldn't India investigate properly if India has been accused before? तो इंडिया का जो इन्वेस्टिगेशन है, shouldn't it have happened in a much, आप बोल सकते हैं, structured, much more structured, proper way? Then the third part is, shouldn't the government clarify if it has spyware? ठीक है, shouldn't the government actually agree or admit that yes, they do have spyware and they, आप बोल सकते हो कहीं ना कहीं, they are also accomplices to this process. So if the government keeps quiet, obviously it could mean citizens are more vulnerable to illegal spying. इसका तो मतलब यही हुआ ना, क्योंकि अगर गवर्नमेंट चुप है इस सारे इश्यूज पे, इसका मतलब है यहाँ के खुद के सिटीजन्स जो है, they are actually prone to get hacked by somebody else, right? So देखा जाए तो टेक्निकली द गवर्नमेंट शुड हैव एडमिटेड इट, बट इट डिड नॉट. सो इन शॉर्ट हम ये कह सकते हैं कि ये जो यूएस कोर्ट है, उन्होंने ये तो प्रूव किया कि Pegasus was misused, and India also faced some similar allegations in 2021, but they did not really properly investigate this process. Now, the government hasn't even revealed whether, it uses spyware or not, जो कि हमें पता चला ही कि हमारी गवर्नमेंट ने एडमिट नहीं किया कि they use spyware, and the Supreme Court committee report has still not been made public. तो इट इज स्टिल बीइंग केप्ट एज अ सीक्रेट, और जब तक वो सीक्रेट रहेगी पीपल विल कीप ऑन हैविंग क्वेश्चंस अराउंड इट, राइट? क्योंकि जब तक आपने लोगों के जो क्वेश्चंस हैं उनको आप आंसर्स देके, वो भी वैलिड आंसर्स देके चुप नहीं करवाया, तो द क्वेश्चंस will keep on propping up even in future. So many believe that India should actually come clean and investigate further to protect their own country's, आप बोल सकते हो, safety, privacy. So that is what the passage is all about. Now, moving to the first question, which is again about the central argument of this editorial. So let's try to understand what this question is asking. Primary argument is again main idea, right? Yes. So let's look at the first option. Judicial rulings abroad mandate disclosure of Pegasus related findings. पहले तो हमें focus समझना पड़ेगा of the passage. The focus of the passage, as we can clearly see, it is about, focus is on domestic secrecy. Domestic secrecy क्यों है, इस चीज पे focus है, ठीक है? It is not really on foreign mandates. तो अब्रॉड के मैंडेट्स पे हमारा फोकस था ही नहीं. फोकस वाज ऑन डोमेस्टिक सीक्रेसी, and that's the reason why option A will be eliminated. India's investigation into Pegasus remains shrouded in secrecy. Yes, that is kind of the central argument of the entire passage, where we get to know that India has been, kind of unwilling to share the report, and to make it public, basically. And people still have so many questions. And everything has been shrouded in secrecy. That means everything has been kept under layers of secrecy. And that's exactly what the primary argument of the passage is. Wait, now let's also see the C one. The NSO group's liability should prompt an international inquiry. अगर हम इसे देखें तो हमें फिर से यही समझना पड़ेगा कि जो फोकस था वो सबसे पहले तो था lack of domestic transparency. इसकी बात यहाँ पे नहीं होती है अगेन ऑप्शन सी में. सो लैक ऑफ डोमेस्टिक ट्रांसपेरेंसी वाज द कोर आइडिया एंड नॉट कॉर्पोरेट लायबिलिटी, जो बात हो रही है ऑप्शन सी में. And that's the reason option C will also be eliminated. Stronger data protection laws are needed to guard against spyware. Although it might look like a very tempting option, but why it cannot be the answer? इसका reason यही है कि the demand is for public disclosure of the report, isn't it? सब लोग चाहते हैं उस रिपोर्ट को देखना, but they are not really making it public. It is not about legislative reform, which has been mentioned in option D. And that's the reason option D will also be eliminated. So the correct answer, the most apt primary argument is option B. Stronger data protection laws के बारे में जो बात हो रही है वो although is very relevant, होने ही चाहिए data protection laws. But the thing is again ये एक legislative reform है जो कोई suggest कर रहा है. Passage का जो focus था वो ये था कि they wanted the report to be out there in the public, which hasn't happened and which still poses a lot of questions. Then moving to the next one. Which alternate title is most suitable? Let's see. First option will be simply eliminated because it is overly sensational. It is trying to make a statement. ठीक है? Although it does talk about, the scandal, but does not really talk about the transparency which we demand from our government. तो आप बोल सकते हो कि आप स्कैंडलाइज करने के लिए ये टाइटल यूज कर सकते हो, वेयर द स्कैंडल हैज बीन टॉक्ड अबाउट, बट द थिंग इज जो की थीम है इस पूरे पैसेज की, जिसमें हम बार बार बोल रहे हैं कि वी नीड ट्रांसपेरेंसी, वी नीड अकाउंटेबिलिटी, उसकी बात यहाँ पे नहीं होती है. राइट. Silence in surveillance calls for transparency. Can this be our answer? When we look at option B, it actually balances two important things which the passage states. Balances the government secrecy, जो कि बात हो ही रही है, and also the call for transparency. और ये दोनों ही चीजें पैसेज में बात होती है इसकी. And that's the reason option B kind of looks like the correct answer so far. Let's see option C. Pegasus probe, legal and ethical quagmire. Quagmire basically means a difficult situation, but they have kind of limited it to legal and ethical only. And again, does not frame the main concept, which is आप बोल सकते हो the क्या बोल सकते हैं, द रिपोर्ट्स बीइंग मेड पब्लिक, उसके बारे में बात नहीं हो रही है, ट्रांसपेरेंसी की बात नहीं हो रही है। तो यहाँ पे लीगल एंड एथिकल क्वागमायर is something which is very narrow, very limited, does not really emphasize on, broken silence and need for report disclosure. तो उसकी बात यहाँ पे नहीं हुई है. Spying scandal demand for open reports. Now the thing is, this kind of looks like a generic outburst. और इसमें एक वर्ड होना चाहिए था जो कि नहीं है, एंड दैट इज व्हाट adds to the lack of nuance, lack of detail to this particular option, and that is basically the word silence. ठीक है, क्योंकि obviously the government has been silent on this matter. अब spying scandal तो बात तो ठीक है, but demand for open reports, ये people are definitely seeking this, but the thing is यहाँ पे क्या हुआ, secrecy वाला जो part है वो उसकी बात ही नहीं होती है यहाँ पे, which was very very important, right? So there were two factors. One was government keeping it a secret, and secondly people asking for transparency and accountability, and that is something which option B kind of encapsulates perfectly, and that's the reason B is the correct answer, right? So that is basically about the Hindu editorials for today's session. And I hope you have understood how to identify your main idea and also title based questions. Now, the next session would be again about something really interesting, again, a question stem that you might have encountered several times. So, I'll be seeing you soon. And until then, it's a goodbye. See you again. And this is Sukanya signing off. Bye bye.